Does Jamie have a box in there, or does she just get stuff in city manager's box?
I think she just uses the city manager's box.
Okay. She probably would want me to put it on her desk.
I mean, you can, but she's not going to be back in the office until.
It's just a credit card receipt, so.
Thank you.
The stand licker's not licking the stand.
All right, it is top of the hour, a minute to spare. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I see folks continuing to trickle in. So we'll just leave up this entrance slide for a moment, and I'll give just a brief overview here before turning it over to Chairman Bradley to kick us off, if that's okay. So my name is Kelly Davis. I am Planning Director with the Berkeley Group. We've been assisting in the development of the comprehensive plan. This is a virtual meeting, and we're going to be holding it via Zoom. So this slide just kind of shows you how to use Zoom if you are unfamiliar with the platform. We've purposefully muted you all at the beginning of this meeting, and then are encouraging everyone to use the chat function, which you can find kind of down at the bottom of your screen here. You can use the chat function here. There are also reaction tools that you can use throughout the time that we're going to be spending together today. You can give us a thumbs up or a clap if you like what you hear. And let's test that out. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you give a clap or a thumbs up using a reaction, or your thumb if you're on video works too. So I see some folks can hear me okay. That's great. Wonderful. You folks not, but I think overall I see a vast majority of folks waving with thumbs up. So it looks like we are all set to go. Chairman Bradley, I'll turn it over to you. Bonnie, I think you need to unmute Chairman Bradley.
All right. Good evening. I'm Patrick Bradley, Chair of the Lexington Planning Commission. On behalf of the Commission, I'd like to welcome everyone to this June 16th virtual public forum on the Lexington Comprehensive Plan. We would, of course, all prefer to be meeting in person as a community. We will do our best to accomplish our goals here tonight. For everyone attending, we hope to provide a clear introduction to the comprehensive plan process and an overview of the current draft version of the plan. For the Planning Commission itself, this will be a listening session. We want to hear what the community has to say about all the work, meaning the Planning Commission and the community have done to get to this point. Many of you may remember back to March of 2018 when we held our public kickoff of this process at VMI. Our hope all along has been to involve the public as much as possible in the process. Tonight is certainly not the last opportunity for input, but it does mark our movement into the home stretch. You might also recall the forum we held to hear input on the issue of chickens. Just as then, tonight we want to be quiet and listen. For us Planning Commission members, this also is really the first time we have stepped back and looked at a full draft, a whole product formatted and inclusive of maps, charts, and graphs. Like you, we want to see how it looks. One of our main goals in terms of process is to have the final public adoption hearing go smoothly with consensus among commissioners and the community, because we've done our job of listening and considering. I'll be handing things over to our Planning Director, Arnie Glazer, for a quick overview and introduction to the Berkeley Group team who have been helping in this process. Then Ms. Kelly Davis of the Berkeley Group will provide a review of the plan and the process moving forward. Ms. Davis will also facilitate the question and answer session. Where necessary, I will chime in on behalf of the Commission to respond to any questions directed to us. You will not be hearing debate or discussion among Commission members, nor will you necessarily be hearing any definitive answers. Our job tonight is to listen. We will have our opportunity moving forward to discuss, respond, and come ultimately to a final draft. So at this point, I'd like to hand things over to Arnie Glazer. Thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley, and good afternoon to everyone. Arnie Glazer, Planning Director for the City of Lexington. Also in attendance, we have teammates from the Berkeley Group that include Drew Williams, Kelly Davis, Catherine Redford, and John McCoy. We also had assistance from the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission, and in particular from Jonathan Howard. And I believe Jonathan Howard will also be attending this afternoon. As you just heard from Dr. Bradley, we held a kickoff meeting in March of 2018 at the Marshall Hall in VMI Post. At that time, the Planning Commission has been diligently working to draft a comprehensive plan for the community. And during each of their meetings where they did discuss the comprehensive plan, there was public input allowed and even encouraged. And staff has also been posting schedules and surveys and reports and draft chapters on the city projects page for the comprehensive plan update, and also an email subscribers list for anyone desiring to keep up with the progress of the comprehensive plan. This afternoon, we're going to provide a summary of the planning process and of the drafted comprehensive plan, and we'll leave ample time for questions and comments. We may not have the answers to all of your questions, but if you could leave a contact information, then we can get back to you to make sure that all the questions do get answered. The presentation will be posted online after we're done. And as always, we would encourage comments to be submitted in writing to the planning department. Next, Kelly will provide us with a more detail of today's agenda.
Thank you, Arnie, for that introduction. As Arnie mentioned, I am Kelly Davis. I'm the planning director with the Berkeley Group, and we have been assisting the City of Lexington and the Planning Commission in drafting the comprehensive plan. Tonight's meeting we are holding via Zoom, and it will be streamed live to Facebook. For those participating via Zoom, I mentioned this earlier, but for those that may have more recently joined us, mics have been purposefully muted, but feel free to enter questions into the chat box. As we move through the presentation, we encourage you to use your reaction buttons that are you can find on Zoom to give us a thumbs up if you like what you hear. For those participating on Facebook Live, Bonnie will be monitoring questions and entering those into the Zoom chat box so that we can make sure that we address them during the Q&A and that those comments are recorded and you all can participate actively. Following that brief overview of the virtual forum, my colleague Catherine will review the purpose of comprehensive plans and the planning process and structure. I will then return to provide a brief overview of each of the core elements of the plan and then talk about next steps. That should take roughly about half an hour, and then we'll open the floor for questions, which we would like to keep moderated using that chat box to the extent possible. Stick around because at the end of this presentation and after the Q&A, we will also post a really brief exit survey where you can just answer some basic questions about what you liked about the plan, about what you heard tonight, what's missing, and maybe what you want to hear more about through this process. And so with that, I will turn it over to Catherine.
Great, thank you, Kelly. So again, my name is Catherine Redfern. I'm principal planner with the Berkeley Group, and my job tonight is to discuss the planning process and planning framework or major parts of Lexington's updated comprehensive plan. But we're going to start with the basics, which is why we're here and what is a comprehensive plan. So a comp plan is a long-range planning document that localities use to guide the many decisions that they make over time. It is a high-level vision and policy document that is used to inform the more detailed or regulatory documents that a city uses. The plan describes the community's vision for where it wants to be in the next 10, 15, 20 plus years, and it includes the specific strategies to get us there. Much of what goes into comprehensive plans is dictated by state code, but at its heart, it is a community-driven process, and each comp plan is unique to each community. So the process for developing Lexington's comprehensive plan has been a 4-phase process, and we are in phase 4, which is plan review, refinement, and eventually adoption. But of course, the work doesn't stop when the plan is adopted. The plan must be implemented. And part of implementation is continual review, monitoring, and updating. Comp plans are meant to be living documents that reflect the needs of the community and allow for any course correction as new challenges and issues arrive. To that end, the state of Virginia actually requires that comp plans be reviewed every 5 years, but best practice is annual review, and that's what we've included in the text of this plan. So like we said, the development of a plan is a community-driven process, and the development of Lexington's comp plan has been no different. We kicked off the process with a large public forum, and we end the process with public review and comment. And in between those, we built in many different platforms and opportunities for people throughout the community to weigh in, be heard, and share their thoughts on what needs to be included in this plan. And actually, here's a good opportunity for you all to try out your first virtual input. If you attended any of the meetings listed on the screen, you can use your reaction button down below or your chat feature down below. Let us know. So what did we hear in those meetings? So this is the highlight of what we heard through all that community input. We had a lot of different meetings, workshops, and surveys, and we heard nuanced and different insights through each of them, but these were the themes that continually floated to the top. And those are the lack of job opportunities, particularly for young people, affordability in general, but specifically related to housing, the lack of shopping and retail services. Lexington has many quality of life amenities, but this is one that people seem to think was missing. And a strong desire to see the community more walkable and more connected. So in addition to the ideas and input from the community at large, we also conducted a thorough baseline analysis. That is, we collected data and information about the social, physical, and economic profile of the city. We did this through analyzing census data, local data, as well as on-the-ground field work and observation. Combining that data with input we received through the community engagement process, we arrived at a key set of challenges and opportunities that really form the backbone of the policies and strategies included within this plan. What you see on the screen before you is a pretty streamlined list. I believe this took about 4 pages in the plan, but I'm going to try and do it in one slide. So the first issue here is that Lexington is largely developed. It's an old city and it can't grow its boundaries outwards. In fact, the state of Virginia has a moratorium on city annexation. So throughout the plan, when we've made recommendations about land use and development, we've had to think innovatively about accommodating growth and paying particular attention to the form and character of the kind of development that might come into Lexington. We know that Lexington has a hard time retaining young families and workers. About half of Lexington's population is made up of college-age people, but only 8% of the population is made up of recent grads and young workers. And a large part of that issue, the ability to retain those younger people, is affordability. Nearly 43% of both high and low income earners are considered cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 1/3 of their total annual income on their housing. And partly this is a result of market. Lexington is, after all, a desirable place to live, but it's also a matter of housing stock. A large portion of the homes in Lexington are much larger and older than what most young people, or on the other end of the spectrum, older people want to pay for or maintain. So as we look to the next 10, 15, 20 years, we had to ask the questions about how we can create more choice in housing so that we can retain young people, as well as allowing older people to age in place. Related to that, we need to look to how we can lessen the emphasis on automobile travel to make a more safer, attracted, and connected community for all of our residents. As an old city, Lexington has old infrastructure. In the next 20 to 30 years, about 70% of the water and sewer lines within the city will need to be replaced. So as we're replacing them, how can we integrate green infrastructure to lessen the burdens on those traditional systems? How can we use green infrastructure to make a more resilient city, a more connected city, a healthier and safer city? And we also must ensure that the work that we're doing to address each of these challenges and each of these opportunities is done equitably for all of Lexington's residents. So these challenges and opportunities directly inform the vision statement for the plan. The vision statement can be considered the mission or guiding principle behind really the entire plan. It was crafted largely by the city's planning commission, and it reads as follows. The City of Lexington will develop strategically and sustainably by diversifying economic opportunities, housing options, and transportation methods, while protecting the city's rich historic and natural resources and preserving the quality of life enjoyed by its residents and visitors. Again, here would be a great opportunity for you to give us a thumbs up, send us a chat. What do you think about this vision statement? The vision statement is supported by a series of planning values. There they are. There are 5 planning values within the comprehensive plan. And these planning values are designed to provide more direct guidance for the goals, objectives, and strategies included in the document. The first planning value is accessibility and diversity. We want to ensure equitability and choice and opportunity for all residents in the city. Sustainable economy. We aim to create a more prosperous city that's resilient and innovative so that we can weather economic fluctuations. Local identity and character. We'll aim to use our identity to create a more vibrant and livable community for everyone. And we create connections between our stories so that we can better steward this place for the next generation. Citizen engagement. We ensure that the right platforms are available so that all citizens can engage, lead, and be heard. And finally, management and collaboration. Lexington is a small city with 2 big institutions, and it's the heart of a region. As such, we have to act as leaders and forge partnerships so that we can better respond to and manage the needs of the people who live here. Which brings us to the planning elements. Planning elements are really the meat of the plan. There are many different features and aspects of what makes a community, and of course, every community is different. But through this planning process, the following 9 planning elements or topics were identified as important to the City of Lexington. And they are historic resources, green infrastructure and natural resources, local economy, arts and culture, housing, land use, transportation, community facilities and infrastructure, and finally, governance. So how do all of these pieces fit together? You can imagine them as a hierarchy with the vision statement at the top, supported by the 5 planning values, and both of which are then articulated through the 9 planning elements. Each planning element contains an overarching goal, and then supporting objectives, which are aligned directly with the values for the plan. And then a series of more specific or targeted strategies or action items to achieve the planning element's goal, and eventually the vision of the plan. And these last 3 items, the planning elements, is what Kelly's going to walk you through next, the planning elements with their supporting goals, objectives, and strategies. And as we're switching speakers, I'll just remind you that if you have any last questions or comments about planning process or planning framework, enter them in now because Kelly's going to be going through each of those 9 elements. There's a lot more information coming your way. So the screen is yours, Kelly.
Thanks so much, Catherine, and thank you to those that have entered some comments in the Zoom chat box. We heard from Molly saying that affordability is not the only issue for younger people considering to move to Lexington, that there's some complaints about the various things to do in Lexington, so maybe we can talk more about that later on in the presentation, but thank you for that. So as I move into the core elements of the plan, I just wanted to first share a brief overview of how these core elements are structured. Each section includes a brief introduction and an overview of any community engagement results that are relevant to the chapter. Then each chapter describes the context to give perspective of that particular element. And then we review partnerships and initiatives that are going to be key for implementation of the planning element. The next 2 bullets, the needs assessment and goal objectives and strategies, are going to serve as the core focus of today's slide. There just is not enough time in this presentation to review each chapter in depth, but we do encourage everyone to review the plan. We've already received a lot of comments so far, so we know that folks are already reading the plan, so we're excited to hear that. And as we move through these different chapters, again, feel free to add comments in the chat box and give us a like. For instance, if you're really interested in the particular area, or in that particular goal statement resonates with you, feel free to give a thumbs up using your reactions button. So the core of the comprehensive plan begins with historic resources. During the comprehensive plan outreach process, Lexington's scenic and historic character was identified as a top asset that community members value. The city's long-standing attention to historic preservation and planning is apparent in the quality of Lexington's downtown and neighborhoods, as well as in the numerous programs and policies and partnerships that are already in place. Needs related to historic preservation include continued emphasis on these partnerships, as well as the need to preserve the city's character while balancing growth and development and promoting heritage tourism. These needs are evident in the chapter goal and strategies that are shown on this slide. This is the goal and the objectives shown on this slide, and the supporting strategies that you can find in the complete plan. Example strategies include encouraging development and redevelopment on upper floors of historic downtown properties as a means of increasing downtown population and economic vibrancy, and the need to educate owners of historic properties on appropriate maintenance procedures and requirements, and promoting Lexington's historic district guidelines, which were recently developed. The next planning element is the green infrastructure and natural resources chapter. Conservation and open space was identified as Lexington's #1 land use challenge, and pedestrian and bike infrastructure and parks ranked among the top priorities during community engagement. For the purposes of this plan, green infrastructure includes natural and nature-based systems that sustain clean air, water, and biodiversity while enriching the quality of life for communities and their residents. This map shows the existing sites, linkages, and waterways that serve as green infrastructure assets in Lexington. As part of the comprehensive plan update, a green infrastructure working group was tasked with examining the existing conditions of green infrastructure in the Lexington community, as well as providing recommendations for improvements to be considered by the Planning Commission. Key needs identified by the working group focused on creating an interconnected and publicly accessible network of green infrastructure, as well as promoting green infrastructure benefits, incentives, and resources in the community. This resulting green infrastructure concept map identifies key sites and projects that serve as catalysts for green infrastructure planning in Lexington. Developing Jordan's Point Park is an important part of this plan. Again, this slide shows the goal and supporting objectives for the green infrastructure. The chapter goals and objectives shown here focus on improving green infrastructure and correcting the identified gaps. The full set of strategies in the plan provide a comprehensive approach to create a more sustainable Lexington, with example strategies including promoting the installation of stormwater best practices, which might include bioswales, pervious surfaces, and rain gardens, and encouraging green building and green infrastructure in development proposals. The next chapter focuses on Lexington's local economy. This slide highlights key needs addressed by the chapter. Lexington's economy is built around education, health services, tourism, and regional commerce. W&L and VMI drive employment and are an economic strength for the community. At the same time, they can present a challenge due to the disproportionate number of untaxed properties that are associated with them. Key economic development needs include creating a more diversified economy and an expanded tax base supported by a business-friendly government that provides easily accessible resources. The goal, objectives, and strategies in this chapter address these identified needs. Example strategies include streamlining business licensing, permitting, and other regulatory requirements, continuing to implement the Downtown Improvement Plan, which can help create a more enjoyable environment for visitors, and establishing an economic development position within the city of Lexington to help recruit businesses and promote available incentives. The next chapter is Arts and Culture, which focuses on leveraging existing assets that are shown in this map and transforming Lexington into an even more vibrant cultural hub in 2040. This can maybe help with what we heard earlier in a comment regarding more things to do in Lexington. Arts and culture needs were identified by a dedicated working group and highlighted opportunities to better leverage existing space and resources to expand access and diversity within the arts. The goal and objectives focus on fostering expansion of artistic and cultural assets through the economy, placemaking, and citizen-led events. Examples of strategies in this chapter include developing a public art master plan, installing public art in city-owned parks and facilities, and examining the feasibility of creating arts and entertainment districts to leverage revitalization funds for arts initiatives. Next, we have the housing chapter. The housing chapter assesses current conditions and market needs related to housing. Recent market studies show a potential need for more multifamily rental housing and additional housing options to support aging residents that may wish to downsize out of single-family homes. Due to the limited undeveloped land in Lexington, the city must look to options such as accessory dwelling units and adaptive reuse of buildings downtown to meet the housing needs of future residents. In addition to the goal and objectives shown here, example strategies include reviewing regulations allowing accessory dwelling units in separate structures in appropriate residential areas in the city, and encouraging energy efficiency and other green principles in the planning, design, construction, and rehabilitation of Lexington housing to reduce long-term ownership costs for residents. Next up is the land use chapter. Land use is arguably the most important chapter of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan survey confirmed what probably comes as no surprise to Lexington residents, that the city's small town character is highly valued. Through these surveys, we also learned that residents desire more housing options, more retail, restaurant, and healthcare uses, and attention to preserving open space. These are some of the key needs addressed in the land use chapter. The land use chapter is unique in that it provides guidance for the character and location of development, infill, and redevelopment over the next 10 to 20 years. The plan prioritizes the creation of a more connected and accessible community, the continuation of traditional neighborhood patterns, and the protection of sensitive cultural and natural resources. The future land use plan shown in this slide establishes gateways, centers, corridors, and overall land use pattern areas and opportunity sites, these hashed marks here. While we don't have time to get into each of these areas today, we encourage you to review the plan to find out more about these areas and the supporting planning objectives and design principles for each area. And we are happy to answer any specific questions or if you'd like us to dive into this more during the Q&A. The future land use map is accompanied by the land use goal and objectives provided here. Example strategies include prioritizing capital improvements such as wayfinding, streetscaping, and underground utilities in designated gateways, corridors, and centers, developing a design and construction standards manual to support implementation of this future land use plan, and ensuring consistent and quality development throughout the city. Next is transportation. Lexington has a small but complex transportation network that must accommodate a growing number of users. As the city looks toward the future, it must consider how to best balance the needs of pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, and drivers. Since Lexington's road network is projected to accommodate automobile traffic through 2040, transportation needs focus heavily on pedestrian, bicycle, and safety improvements. The transportation chapter also includes recommended projects. The projects shown here were identified based on Lexington's existing and future transportation needs. In addition to these projects, 2 studies were identified, a bicycle and pedestrian plan and a VDOT road safety audit for several intersections throughout the city. The transportation goal and objectives reinforce the need to provide safe and efficient mobility choices for all residents. Some of the strategies in this plan include supporting the development of facilities and parking for bicycle and other micro-mobility devices, and developing and implementing design requirements for new construction and redevelopment projects to upgrade sidewalks and improve access management provisions such as interparcel connections and limitations on curb cuts for new development. The community facilities chapter is next. This chapter describes Lexington's existing community facilities and services, along with required investments and capital improvements anticipated over the duration of this comprehensive plan. The quality public recreation facilities, fire and rescue services, schools, and libraries shown in the map are but a few of the community assets that make Lexington a really great place to live. The 2018 Comprehensive Plan Survey revealed a number of service priorities for Lexington's community facilities, with particular emphasis on parks and open space. Water and sewer infrastructure will also be a high priority as the city works to repair its aging system. In some cases, Lexington will also need to continue working with regional partners to address cost-effective solutions for shared services such as libraries and the jail. The goal, objectives, and strategies in the community facilities chapter provide an action plan to meet service demands and improve existing infrastructure while also capitalizing on opportunities and partnerships to enhance community services. The strategies cover a wide range of issues and concerns. Examples include ensuring that all city facilities meet ADA standards for accessibility, and repairing and upgrading the city's sewer lines to address inflow and infiltration, which helps protect water quality and ensure that sewer capacity is maintained. The final planning element that we'll discuss today is the governance chapter. This chapter examines the functional role of the city government as well as initiatives to increase citizen participation and ensure that information is disseminated both timely and accurately. The goal, objectives, and strategies in this chapter are designed to ensure that Lexington maintains an effective and transparent city government that works on behalf of the citizens to implement the comprehensive plan. Example strategies touch on community engagement, partnerships with Buena Vista and Rockbridge County, and strengthening the connection between the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, and the comprehensive plan. And last but not least is the implementation chapter. When the plan is adopted, this is when the real work of implementation begins. The implementation chapter describes the tools to implement the plan and assigns priorities and responsibilities for that implementation. As Catherine mentioned earlier, as a best practice, we recommend that the implementation matrix be reviewed annually as part of the city's budgeting process to help set priorities and measure progress toward meeting the city's vision and goals. So thank you for bearing with me as we kind of moved through that brief and quick overview of the comprehensive plan chapters. I see that we have a lot of comments that we've received, so thank you. For all of you that maybe would like to add more, feel free to continue commenting in the chat box, and we'll move into the Q&A portion of the meeting. As we mentioned at the beginning, again, we are encouraging everyone to submit comments to the chat box, and we'll have a facilitator, John McCoy, will read them for everyone on the phone and Facebook Live. As I mentioned previously, for those on Facebook, and again, in case anyone has more recently joined us, Bonnie will be relaying questions received via Facebook to help us answer them via this forum. I also want to mention that those that would like to submit comments formally are encouraged to do so in the next 30 days before July 16th to help the Planning Commission review those comments and have time for discussion and refinement before the formal public hearings. That's not to say that you can't continue to submit comments after that time, but that is our public review period that we'd like to encourage everyone to review the plan and provide comments during that time. We're hoping to move toward the public hearing process towards the end of summer and into fall. The public hearings have not been scheduled at this time because we really want to give the community the opportunity to review the plan and get the pulse before moving on to the next phase. We do encourage everyone to visit the city's website to view the full plan and to hang on through the Q&A to take the exit survey. For those that are not able to stay through the Q&A, I'll also go ahead and put that up now just so you can see it here, and we'll send that link over through the chat box as well. So with that, we can go ahead and open it up to some questions. Let's see. Bonnie, could you go ahead and unmute John and Catherine and Arnie? And Drew will be helping with some questions.
Thank you, Bonnie. Like Kelly said, my name is Jonathan McCoy. I am a planner with the Berkeley Group, and tonight I'll be attempting to go through some of the questions that you posted in the group chat and on Facebook Live as well. It's my intent to go through the questions as we receive them and allow our hosts here to answer them to the best of their abilities. So without further ado, I'll get started with the first question we received, and that is from Doug Harwood. He would like to know who the interviews the stakeholders were and what groups were interviewed during the process. So Kelly, if you'd like to take that away.
I think actually Jamie has already responded in the chat box. There is a full list of interviewees that were provided in the plan, and they include a long list, so I'm not going to read everyone, but you can find those in the plan. But the police were interviewed, the school board, Rockbridge Area Relief Association, the PDC, the fire department, and the different department directors have provided input at various points throughout this plan. And then we also had the working groups. There was a green infrastructure working group and the arts and culture working group that's provided input on those chapters. So, you know, in addition to the interviewed stakeholders and other forms of community outreach, did just want to note and thank those that participated in those working groups for providing their input.
Absolutely. All right. I hope that answered the question for the most part anyways. Moving on, our next topic, less of a question, more of a general comment shared by a few in the chat. They would like to see the history of Lexington expanded beyond the few years of the Civil War. So if we'd like to comment on that at all. Catherine, if you'd like to start, and maybe somebody else has anything to share as well.
Sure. First of all, I completely agree. The comprehensive plan, however, doesn't dictate what portion of history we are interpreting. It does recognize that Lexington has a vast and complex history, and we, through the strategies we've included in the plan, we're hoping to work towards acknowledgement of the diversity of historic resources that are available within the community. So just to echo agreement with the sentiment and say that the plan is working towards that.
I will just also add to that, that the Planning Commission also discussed this at their last meeting at length, and we're in full agreement that there was, this was going to be something, an amendment to the, or not even an amendment, but a change to the plan before we move on to the public hearing process. Oh, John is muted. Bonnie, can you go ahead and unmute John?
Sorry about the technical difficulties. I tried to mute myself while you were talking and I couldn't unmute. So learning curves. All right, so hopefully that answers that question. Moving on, Debbie Funkhauser would like to know, aren't there fees in lieu of taxes from the two colleges? And I believe Arnie might be able to shed some light on that.
My understanding is that WNL does pay a pilot or a payment in lieu of taxes that covers some, but perhaps not all of their tax if they were taxed. And VMI, being a state-owned property, does not pay that a tax or a fee.
Okay, thank you, Arnie. Moving on, somebody, PGW, would like to see the green infrastructure initiatives include incentives for planting shade trees. They say we are losing a good many of them to illness and severe pruning, and we are not planting nearly enough. So I know our green infrastructure chapter is pretty expansive, but Catherine, if you'd like to expand on that some as you can.
Sure. The green infrastructure chapter does include a strategy specifically for increasing urban tree canopy. It also acknowledges that the city does a lot currently in terms of their tree board, city arborists to foster tree canopy within the city. That said, the last assessment of tree canopy within the city was in 2009, I believe. So it recognizes the need to look and plan more strategically for tree canopy growth as trees die out. So it is something that we've looked at within the green infrastructure plan.
Thank you, Catherine. Moving on to the next, this is another general topic, I believe, kind of related to the diversity that we talked about before. But Chris Wise says, I'm not sure what heritage tourism is, but I would rather see the use of historic tourism, as heritage means different things to different people. So Catherine, maybe you'd like to respond to that as well?
I think that goes in the vein of the question we answered previously. And yes, particularly these days, those are loaded terms, and we'll be looking at them in detail as we're editing and refining the plan.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. Debbie Funkhauser asked, how strong is the rental demand given Washington Lee's student housing expansion? Kelly or Arnie, would you like to take that away?
Sure, I'll take that one. We recently had a market study done for the VDOT property that the city is interested in purchasing from the state because it is a surplus piece of property. And in that market rate study or analysis, it did reveal that there is a market in Lexington for up to 200 additional units. So to me, that shows that there is additional demand there for housing units in Lexington.
Thank you, Arnie. And the last question that I have here is from Luis Ward saying, we at 50 Ways Rockbridge and RACC believe that the green infrastructure chapter should also address energy sustainability and environmental resilience. We have sent to the Planning Commission an objective and a list of strategies that we propose be included in the chapter. Catherine, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. I think we've seen those strategies come through, and I think our answer is that we will read them and look at them and assess including them within the chapter. I have not had time today to look through them, but I believe other members of my team have, if they want to speak to it.
Yes, I can just mention that we have received those, and it'll be a point of discussion for Planning Commission to consider at future meetings. I see the chairman is giving us a thumbs up that he agrees.
Excellent. And as far as questions go, I believe that's the last of them that I have to right now. There's some more comments about tree shading as well, but I think we covered that. So I will cede the floor back to the host, Kelly Davis.
Well, let me just, it looks like we've got a few, okay, shade trees. Okay, yeah, it looks like people just kind of continuing to comment on some of these questions, but I don't see any new questions in the chat. So feel free to continue. We've got a little while longer that we've allocated, and we'll continue to answer questions as they come in. We'll give it another moment. All right. Nothing else in the chat box here. So I think we were going to open up the lines for, let's see, we have one more question. The question was, and John, I'll go ahead and read it since I started. Any possibility of a recreation facility or gym? Arnie, that's not something that I have heard come up during this, but maybe you can speak any more to that if it was something that you had heard.
Just in generalities, in that RARO, Rockbridge Area Recreation Organization, is always looking for additional gym space, ball fields, any kind of recreational space. And there is a possibility that we could construct one additional gym potentially at the Brubaker Annex, but that still remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. I think we do strategies related to improvements at Brubaker.
We also have one more additional question from Molly. Looks like they'd like to know if we'll be publishing the compilation of written comments from the public.
I can take that one. We are pulling together all the comments that we receive in written and otherwise, and so we will be providing those to the Planning Commission, and we can also post them on the Comprehensive Plan website as well.
Thank you, Kelly. Molly's also said there are 15 soccer fields in the city and county, and we need diversity of outdoor activities.
Yes, parks and open space was definitely important to the community, something that we heard throughout the planning process and something that's highlighted in the plan.
We have another comment here asking if there were any plans for the old lumberyard property by the Lindfest Center. I'm not sure, Arnie or Kelly, if either of you would like to respond to that.
That's identified in the land use on the future planning framework map specifically as an opportunity area. So there's opportunity there for something else to occur, but that is in private ownership, and we will have to react to whatever the development proposal, if there ever is one, and then use our framework map to guide us in that approval and review process.
Excellent. Thank you, Arnie. Chris Wise has a question. What does an opportunity zone mean? Referencing East Lexington with very poor access, infrastructure, and flow.
I believe that this question is in reference to the McThinia parcel, Arnie.
It's going to be the area in addition to the McThinia parcel, because Mr. McThinia has a conservation easement on his parcel, but this is also coming from the previous East Lexington Bluffs special planning area, where there were additional developments considered in that. So this opportunity area is really coming forth from that joint effort between the city and the county for not areas that aren't just in the city, but also immediately adjacent and in Rockbridge County.
Yeah, I'll just add that the opportunity areas included within the framework plan, the future land use plan, don't spell out specific uses or a specific kind of development, but just focus attention on those areas. And I think Kelly's zooming towards them. Focus on those areas for potential reinvestment of whatever kind might be most appropriate for that area.
Thank you, Catherine. And if anybody feels their question wasn't fully answered, if they like any more description, just feel free to put that in the comment tracker, and I would be happy to bring that back up again as well. But moving on, Lee Merrill asks, has this comp plan taken Washington Lee's Lee Avenue plans into account? Catherine, if you'd like to take that away, you're more than welcome to.
So I think we can let Arnie take that one. We do discuss partnerships or at W1L as a partnership in land use, but I'll let Arnie speak a little bit more to this one, this particular question.
The comp plan has not specifically taken the draft ideas in that WNL has presented to council into account in the comp plan. WNL is working on a draft master plan that they will present to Planning Commission and Council once it is finalized on their end, and then it'll go through the public hearing process. But as of right now, we have seen a few drafts of ideas for both the Lee Avenue and for Washington Street. But again, those are just draft at this point, and we will have a public hearing process for the adoption of a master plan for WNL once they have finalized that plan and gotten the thumbs up or the approval from their supervisors, or I'm sorry, their board.
Thank you, Arnie. Chris Wise said,
Arnie, I would just add that perhaps it's important that while things do change in the community, things will change from time to time. As was mentioned earlier on, it's good to take a look on an annual basis to review what has changed, and if it makes sense to amend the comprehensive plan, we can always do that. So even though it is what it is today, it is a flexible document intended to be a flexible tool and should be reviewed regularly and updated as needed.
thank you, Drew.
Sorry,
We have another, no, you're okay. I was just reading the question. Does the plan address opportunities for public-private partnership and stimulation of free enterprise initiatives? It's a great question.
So partnerships was something that was extremely important throughout the development of the plan. One of the core values related to this plan that the Planning Commission determined was community engagement and citizen engagement and management and collaboration. And that really is encompassing this idea of public and private partnerships. As a small city, Lexington needs to partner actively with both other entities, nonprofits, its regional partners, other localities, as well as businesses. And so these are some of the key components that are included in the strategies. In addition, really kind of unique to this plan is that, as I mentioned earlier, there is a portion of the plan dedicated to highlighting various partnerships that can be leveraged to help support implementation of the plan.
Thank you, Kelly. Debbie Funkhauser has a comment, said the city-county interface, especially at East Lexington, is significant. Anybody like to comment on that?
I think, again, that highlights, that point is highlighted in the land use chapter as well as in the transportation chapter in particular. related to working with Rockbridge County, and the Planning Commission has a good relationship with Rockbridge County's Planning Commission as well, including joint meetings which occurred even at the onset of this comprehensive plan, just so that they could be working together and make sure that they were working towards shared goals. I'll also just note that I moved back to this land use slide because as we were talking about opportunity areas and the East Lexington site, I just wanted to make sure that everyone could see that highlighted here. It's this hashed area that was in question earlier.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelly. Looks like Stephanie Wilkinson shedding a little bit more light on the public-private partnership question from earlier says, a reminder that Main Street Lexington is a public-private partnership that has direct impact on the economic health of our downtown, including the filling of empty storefronts and recruitment and support for new businesses. Thank you for that, Stephanie.
Yes, absolutely. Main Street Lexington is one of the key partners, and they were definitely noted in various chapters of the plan as going to be extremely critical for implementing this plan.
Absolutely. Chris Wise has a question. The analysis states that Lexington is constrained by the anti-annexation rules. Have opportunities for cooperation and collaboration been sufficiently addressed in the plan?
So, Chris, maybe you can expand a little bit. So in terms of annexation, it is state code driven. And so that's where that's coming from when Catherine mentioned that earlier. It's not a city rule, but rather a state prohibition at this time. That said, as I mentioned previously, this plan does highlight the relationship between Rockbridge County and the city, and this is going to be extremely important, particularly as it comes to housing and economic development. As a small city, limited opportunities for greenfield development, the city and Rockbridge County are going to need to work together to make sure that housing can be affordable for the entire community. And I saw a thumbs up from Chris, so it sounds like we might have covered it.
Okay, great.
Excellent. And that's it right now for the questions. If anybody has any more questions or comments or would like further explanation, please submit that in the comment box and we'll attempt to address it the best we can.
All right, looks like maybe we're wrapping up in terms of chat box comments. I'm going to go ahead and, feel free to enter any final thoughts as I move forward back to that exit survey. I'll post that and just highlight again, here's the link to the comprehensive plan and Arnie's email where you can find or go ahead and send your comments. Again, that public comment period through July 16th. And the link to the exit survey, I think it was shared at one point in the chat, but we'll make sure we share that again before we close out here. Would any, we're trying to moderate via the chat, but if anyone feels like they really have something that they would just like to share and would like to be unmuted, you can raise your hand and we can see if Bonnie can go ahead and unmute for any final thoughts or comments. I'm not seeing anyone. So perhaps with that, Mr. Chairman, would you like to make any final?
Yes, I do see one, a comment or a question from George Kosovich about internet access. Could you recall any specific places where we addressed that in the plan? And
Yes. Sorry about that. Thanks for noting that. So we do in the community facilities chapter have a very small section on telecommunications and internet access. When we were looking at the research associated with that, we were finding that there was fairly good broadband and internet access throughout the city. We did receive a comment from the public about adding additional Wi-Fi locations throughout the city. So that's on the list of public comments that we have to discuss with Planning Commission, but it would be in that community facilities chapter.
Thanks. And Lee Merrill notes that we can do better. As you said, we try to get an A on that score. So thanks. I will say, if we are getting near to the end of this, I will say that we are glad for all these comments and the sort of topics we've been hearing about from the get-go, especially on green infrastructure. And we do have a lot of your input that we just got today and more. We'll be discussing that in our next meeting in terms of the question of history. That we already started a pretty robust discussion in the Planning Commission about that, and that is going to continue. The W&L material and ideas of what's coming next with them, some of that has come up fairly recently as far as we're concerned, and so we're going to take a look at how that's reflected in the plan and how we address that and what we know and what we don't know at the moment, and make sure that there's always a good open process in place for dealing with all of those. And the question of the opportunity zone of East Lexington, again, that has also come up as a question that we've begun some discussion about. What do we want to say about that? How does that work given where it is and what's there already and what can be done? So these are things we're glad to hear them, and we're going to be glad to have these discussions when we get back to our own meeting. So keep the things coming, the comments coming, because they really do inform us. We're trying to be as responsible as possible, responsive as you can see, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, so that's all I have to say because I'm supposed to be listening anyway.
All right, thank you so much. So I know that John shared that exit survey again. We'll make sure that stays open for the next day or two so that folks that participated that maybe were on Facebook Live can have access to that as well. And with that, I'm seeing a few more final questions come in via Facebook Live. Going to continue to stream in.
Yes, there's one question here asking if there are any plans in place to pursue CDBG funds to help with affordable housing needs in the city, and CDBG is Community Development Block Grant Funds.
I can answer that question. Our Threshold Housing Commission did administer a CDBG grant for the Thompson's Knoll development, and there were maybe some issues with that development, and at the moment our Threshold Housing Commission is not desirous of pursuing any more CDBG funding sources for affordable housing in Lexington. That may change in the future, but at this time the answer would be no.
All right, thank you, Arnie. We've got some additional comments coming in to thank Chairman Bradley and members of Planning Commission, and it has been our pleasure as the Berkeley Group to work with the Planning Commission and with the City of Lexington on this comprehensive plan. We've still got a lot of work to do, a lot of comments to address, but we are so thankful to have the opportunity. We would have loved to have been with you all in person in an open house format, but we also wanted to give the opportunity to participate in this point in the planning process before we get to public hearings, to continue listening. We are listening. Planning Commission is very passionate about all of these issues and wants to hear from you. So thank you, and we will, please feel free. There's an opportunity in the exit survey to leave your email if you'd like to learn more about meetings. We continue to encourage comments and participation in this process. So thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye all.